Today I realize how hard it was for him to achieve what he achieved at the time, because it has been a struggle. It's been 3 years of work. I want you to know my dear friend Anne Katteringham is slightly hard of hearing, and Vamona talks very softly. So if you can imagine 3 years of interviews, 3 years of conversations, even in Pomburpa, where the traffic is going up and down during the day, it'll give you some idea of how difficult the journey it has been for Anne. She's new. She's new to Goa, she's completely new to art, and she was new to Vamona. But she loved his eyes, she loved his work, and she loved the man. So she followed him for 3 years. What is important for you to know is that Anne has had to check a lot of the information that Mr. Vamona gave her. So she had to go to Lisbon a couple of times, she had to talk to his friends, she had to establish that he did go to Belles Arts, she had to establish that he went to the Gulbenkian Foundation and received 2 scholarships from there, she had to meet his friends, she had to see an exhibition of his work in Lisbon. And then she's the one who started the site on Facebook. And we have now over 70,000 viewings and I think over 500 emails from his students. They live in Canada, in Brazil, in Mozambique, in Portugal. And they were surprised to know that Mr. Vamona was still alive, and still strong, and still painting, and still his work was as beautiful as ever. Looking at these emails, 90% of the emails were from women. Only 10% were from men. And 90% of the women said he was wonderful. He didn't touch me. He was kidding. But they all had the nicest things to say about this wonderful man. They talked about his art and how he encouraged them right through. When he was in Mozambique, he was imprisoned for some time. He stood by his students, and he made sure that when he was released, his students were released with him. He did an awful lot of work in Nampula, in Mozambique. During that time, I'm personally a collector of African art, actually, and our foundation is VS Arts, is dedicated to the education of children in art in Africa. So we're following that line of art, and that's where we found Vamona's work quite interesting. He was there at the time when Mulagatley Mulagatlana was an artist, and he was also in prison at that time, in the late 60s, early 70s. Things were tough then. So I have, Anne has documented most of what she's been able to collect from talking to friends, from talking to people, from talking to Vamona, his family, and she's been able to recently corroborate a lot of the information that he had given us from the Facebook emails that had been coming from his students. So now we have quite a lot of information on Vamona, but I personally think this is only the beginning of a new Vamona we're yet to see. So I think I'll read to you what Mr. Vamona is saying. You know, he's a character. He really is a character. He's not the easiest man in the world. That quiet man that you see sitting down there with a smile on his face is not the Vamona that I have learned to respect and love. He couldn't paint the way he paints, like that one there, or Cry My Beloved Goa, if he was a quiet, very calm, consolidated in his thoughts man, as he looks almost angelic there. He couldn't paint this way. He couldn't. I mean, he's done a painting, for instance, which is in the book, which we dare not show here, of a cow. The painting is 10 foot. 10 foot 5 inches long, of a cow with a whole series of crows at the top, biting at the cow from the top end and sitting on it with blood dripping. And on the side is another group of crows, waiting for the crows that are sitting on the cow to finish eating the cow, so to speak. And at the top is a vulture. Now, that is a very, very powerful painting. You know, unless he's having some very powerful thoughts, you can't produce this kind of work. He is talking about how government controls people, controls its wealth, controls its fortune, controls its future. He's not necessarily talking about any particular government, though very much on board the agony of womanhood. And he also talks in his speech and when he talks to you as a friend about without womanhood there is no birth. And so you will see some of that in some of his old works, and now it's coming to roost. I think his best work is yet to come. And as I told you, Vamona is not an easy man to pin down. And it has been a struggle for Anne, and she has got herself very uptight on occasions, and justly so. But Anne, you've done a phenomenal work. Phenomenal work about this man, and tribute to you. Thank you very, very much indeed. So, to continue with the difficult aspect of Vamona, he says, I don't want to say anything, I've got something wrong with my throat. That's him. So he says, you read what I've written. So I read what is written. And then I'll comment a little bit about it. He says, first of all, he did not want any politicians here. He wanted a child to present this book that Anne has written to him. So we have his nephews. So this is his letter to you all. My dear kids, ladies and gentlemen, for more than 30 years I was lying half hidden under the mossy stones. Thanks to me, the lover of arts, I was being discovered. His limitless efforts to put me into the limelight is beyond description. Madame Anne Katteringham took a heavy task to write my biography. Her efforts and their dues. A brilliant, noble biography of me. At this decisive moment, I have to express my thanks to Rajendra Musakar, whom I admire as a human being and as an artist. He is one of the foundation stones to what we feel now, the release of my biography. Everyone has a right to be blessed by the sun rays. That's Mr. Vamona's message to your home. But we'll try and push him to say something in a little while. We'll try and push him. Personally, I think, I think his works are extraordinary. His line drawings are really beautiful, and I don't know whether you'll have ever read a book by, I think, Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks about very brilliant people at a very young age producing their finest work because they have no fear. I have seen some of that work of Vamona in the 60s and the 50s and the 70s, or the 60s in particular. And then they also produce their finest work because it's too late to be frightened of anything much later on. And I think his finest works are beginning to show themselves. I have not seen that kind of work before, I have to say, in the last few years. And I think they're strong and powerful and colorful. So I think his works are now getting known in Lisbon, in Europe, and they are getting known in Africa, and he is getting known as an African artist from Goa. So I would regard that as a man who's now free, whose painting is out of the frame and is now no longer dependent upon his reputation in Goa. But he loves Goa. So for him, his reputation in Goa is paramount. Salute him. He's a good artist. The other subject that I want to talk, because it is something about Vamona that he refers to from time to time, is the issue that he felt a little bit offended when he was left out and he wasn't regarded and so on. For whatever reason, I want to just refer to a wonderful article that it's a foundation called Diva Art Foundation of Delhi, which has been established by people we know and friends of my daughter. And there's a lovely person who's written, called Natasha Jinwala, who's written an article to do with debating censorship within the sphere of public culture. So I will only read just extracts, just for you to know that there is fear in the community of keeping art under control. There is fear. And that fear must be free, because you're an artist and you have all freedom. So she starts by saying, the paper burns, but the words fly away. This was written by Akiba Ben Joseph in the 1st century. So she goes on to say, this quote, which can be traced back to the 1st century AD, poetically states a fundamental truth, that an artist may be punished for his or her artwork, but their work lives on in memory and in popular culture. It takes on new forms, is assimilated into other expressions, and recirculates as signs that come to invent new meanings. Mr. Vamona, that is what your art is telling us. And I want you to realize that, so carry on painting, carry on being challenged, carry on getting upset, carry on getting frustrated. It's improving your art. The other thing, I'll take another extract from there. She says, who is the public? She says, when fundamentalist forces envision that it is an anonymous, malleable entity, they begin to claim the right to take offense and carry this right forward to the extremities of vandalism. Was the public offended by M.F. Hussein's Bharat Mata, Surendran Nair's an actor rehearsing the interior monologue of Icarus, and Akbar Padamsi's The Lovers? And then she goes on to say, over the years, India has experienced an increase in politically motivated censorship of the arts. Several such cases are highly overt public attacks on established artists. M.F. Hussain, F.N. D'Souza, Surendran Nair, Akbar Padamsi. What is more dangerous is an intricate machinery that is at work, promoting censorship through narrow-minded nationalism by creating a flawed history around sacred imagery at more covert levels. We have to fight for art. We have to continue to fight for the freedom of art and the freedom of expression in art, through art. And I personally absolutely love the artistic talent in Goa and the rest of India, but Goa in particular because I'm Goan. And I salute you, all the artists. Thank you very much.